How they declared war on humanity, then realized we don't die alone. The massive doors to the Galactic Council chambers opened with a sound like thunder rolling across mountains. Ambassador David Kane stepped through, his black diplomatic uniform stark against the swirling colors of alien architecture that stretched beyond human comprehension. The chamber was a living thing, its walls pulsing with energy that connected the minds of species across 1,000 star systems. Kane had prepared for this moment his entire life, but nothing could have prepared him for the sheer scale of what he now faced. The chamber rose in impossible spirals, defying physics with gravity fields that allowed representatives to sit on walls and ceilings as easily as floors. Hundreds of alien beings filled the space, their forms ranging from crystalline entities that sang in frequencies that made his bones ache to massive creatures that seemed to be made of living metal. At the center of it all sat the High Arbitrator, an ancient being whose species had ruled the galaxy when Earth was still a ball of molten rock, its 6 eyes fixed on Kane with an intensity that felt like standing too close to a star. The translator implanted behind Kane's ear crackled to life, converting alien speech into words he could understand. "The human representative will approach," the arbitrator commanded. Its voice carried the weight of eons, speaking for creatures that had seen the birth and death of entire civilizations. Kane walked forward, his footsteps echoing in the vast space. Every eye in the chamber followed his movement. He could feel their curiosity, their amusement, and underneath it all, their contempt. To them, he represented a species that had barely learned to leave their home planet. Humans had been part of galactic society for less than a century, while some of these beings had ruled star systems for millions of years. The floor beneath his feet showed images of Earth, rotating slowly in holographic display. But these weren't the peaceful views his own satellites would show. These images highlighted every weapon, every military installation, every sign of human aggression. The message was clear. They knew exactly what humanity was capable of. "David Kane of the human species," the arbitrator announced. "You stand before the Galactic Council to answer charges that your people have violated the fundamental laws that govern civilized space." Kane stopped at the designated position, a small circle of light in the center of the vast chamber. Around him, alien representatives leaned forward in their various forms of seating. Some floated in bubbles of liquid. Others clung to surfaces with appendages that defied description. All watched him with the same expression, predators studying prey. "What are these charges?" Kane asked, though he already knew. His government had briefed him extensively on what was coming. A new figure rose from the assembled crowd. This one was humanoid but stretched impossibly tall, its skin the color of deep space. When it spoke, stars seemed to twinkle in its voice. "Your species has been observed converting asteroids into kinetic weapons. You have militarized your entire solar system. Most disturbing of all, you have begun experiments that could weaponize stellar bodies themselves." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Kane noticed that even among the aliens, this last accusation seemed to cause unease. Apparently, turning stars into weapons was considered extreme even by galactic standards. "We have the right to defend ourselves," Kane replied calmly. The laughter that erupted from the chamber was like nothing he had ever heard. It came in frequencies both above and below human hearing, in colors that hurt to perceive, in harmonics that made reality itself seem to vibrate. When it finally died down, the arbitrator spoke again. "Defend yourselves? From whom? You are a species of barely 5 billion individuals on a single world. Your technology is primitive by galactic standards. Your fastest ships take years to travel distances we cross in days. What possible threat could require the level of weaponization you have achieved?" Kane had been waiting for this question. It was the key to everything that would follow. From you, the silence that followed was absolute. Even the ambient sounds of the chamber's living walls seemed to pause. The arbitrator's 6 eyes narrowed to points of light. "Elaborate." Kane gestured to the display still showing Earth's defenses. 67 years ago, your survey ships appeared in our system. They spent 3 months cataloging everything about us. Our population, our technology, our military capabilities, our resources. They took samples of our DNA, our plants, our animals. Then they left without making contact. He paused, letting this sink in. But they also left behind monitoring devices. Devices we found. Devices that told us exactly what kind of future you had planned for us. The chamber erupted in denials and protests, but Kane continued speaking over the chaos. We learned about the other species you've encountered. The Kethmori, whose world you strip-mined for rare metals after declaring them incompatible with galactic civilization. The Veltar, whose population you relocated to work camps because they were too aggressive for peaceful coexistence. The Zephyrians, who simply disappeared from all records after refusing to accept your version of guidance. The protests grew louder, but Kane noticed that none of them actually denied his accusations. The arbitrator raised one massive hand and silence returned. Even if your allegations were accurate, it said slowly, those species posed legitimate threats to galactic stability. They were given chances to integrate peacefully and chose violence instead. Kane smiled, and something about that expression made several of the nearer alien representatives shift uncomfortably. That's exactly what we figured you'd say about us eventually. Humans are too violent, too unpredictable, too dangerous to exist freely. So we decided to make sure that if you ever tried to integrate us the way you integrated those other species, it would cost you more than you were willing to pay. The displays around the chamber flickered and changed. Instead of showing Earth's defenses, they now showed something that made even the ancient arbitrator lean forward in surprise. Deep space monitors throughout the galaxy were detecting massive energy signatures, not from Earth but from locations scattered across known space. What are we looking at? The tall alien demanded. Kane's smile widened. Insurance policies. See, while you were ignoring us for the past 67 years, we weren't just building defenses around Earth. We were studying your civilization, learning your weaknesses, and preparing for this exact conversation. The energy signatures on the displays grew stronger. Whatever was generating them was big. Very big. Impossible, breathed a creature that looked like a floating brain in a crystalline shell. Your species lacks the technology for interstellar deployment on this scale. You're right, Kane agreed. We do lack that technology, but we're very good at stealing it. The implications of that statement sent a chill through the chamber. If humans had somehow acquired advanced technology without the Council's knowledge, it meant their surveillance and control systems weren't as perfect as they believed. Kane looked up at the arbitrator, his expression never changing. Now, shall we discuss the terms of humanity's membership in your Galactic Council? Or would you prefer to learn exactly what we've been building out there in the dark? The ancient being's 6 eyes studied the human with new interest. For the first time in millennia, the arbitrator was facing something unexpected, something that might actually be dangerous. The game had begun. The High Arbitrator's 6 eyes remained fixed on David Kane as emergency protocols activated throughout the chamber. Alien representatives huddled in their species groups, their voices creating a symphony of concern that the translation systems couldn't fully process. The living walls of the chamber pulsed faster, responding to the elevated stress levels of its occupants. You speak of theft as if it were an accomplishment, the arbitrator said, its voice carrying a dangerous edge. Civilized species develop their own technologies through legitimate research and cooperation. Kane gestured toward the displays still showing energy signatures scattered across the galaxy. Civilized species also don't secretly catalog other worlds for future exploitation. We learn to adapt. A new figure emerged from the crowd of representatives. This one was roughly humanoid, but covered in what appeared to be living armor that shifted colors as it moved. When it spoke, its voice carried the authority of a military commander. I am General Orcs of the Hegemony Defense Forces. These energy signatures you're displaying could be fabricated. Humans lack the industrial capacity for such widespread deployment. Kane's expression didn't change, but he reached into his jacket and withdrew a small device. Several alien guards immediately tensed, their various forms of weaponry beginning to charge. Kane held up his other hand in a peaceful gesture. Relax. It's just a communicator. He pressed a single button on the device. Across the galaxy, monitoring stations belonging to dozens of different species suddenly detected massive objects decloaking in their local space. The chamber's displays updated in real time, showing the reactions of startled military commanders as ships the size of small moons appeared seemingly from nowhere. But these weren't ships in any conventional sense. They were structures massive and angular, covered in arrays that pulsed with barely contained energy. Each one was positioned near a major population center or strategic installation, close enough to be threatening, but far enough to avoid immediate attack. 53 locations, Kane announced calmly. each one containing technology that took us 6 decades to steal, reverse engineer, and improve upon. Each one capable of eliminating everything within a 50 light-year radius. The silence in the chamber was deafening. General Corks's armor had shifted to a deep red color that Kane's briefings had identified as indicating extreme agitation. "You're bluffing," the general said, but his voice lacked conviction. No species would build weapons of such magnitude. The energy requirements alone would destabilize local space. Kane pressed another button on his device. The display zoomed in on one of the mysterious structures, revealing details that made several aliens gasp audibly. The structure wasn't just a weapon platform. It was actively feeding on the nearby star, drawing energy directly from the stellar core through massive conduits that shouldn't have been possible to construct. "We call them Reaper stations," Kane explained. "Each one is essentially a miniature Dyson sphere, capable of harvesting and redirecting stellar energy. The technology is based on designs we found in the wreckage of the Veltar homeworld after you located them." The tall alien who had first accused humanity of militarization stepped forward, its star-like voice now carrying notes of fear. "The Veltar destroyed their own technology before we could study it. Their databases were completely wiped." Kane's smile was cold. "They wiped their databases. They didn't wipe their people. Some of the Veltar survived your relocation camps. We found them." This revelation sent new waves of shock through the chamber. The Council's records showed the Veltar is completely eliminated, their survivors supposedly dying in the work camps decades ago. "Where?" the arbitrator demanded. "Hidden, scattered, angry." Kane's voice hardened. "Turns out that when you systematically destroy someone's civilization, the survivors tend to hold grudges. They were very willing to share their technology with someone who promised to use it against you." The displays shifted again, showing not just the Reaper stations but the faces of aliens that many council members recognized. Veltar Kethmori Zephyrians, species that were supposed to be extinct or completely subjugated, all very much alive and all working with humanity. General Corks's armor had turned almost black. "This is impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such widespread collaboration." "Your intelligence networks rely on species that fear you," Kane replied. "Survivors who've been pushed beyond fear tend to be much better at staying hidden. They also tend to be very motivated teachers." He pressed another button, and the chamber filled with new images. Human ships, but not the primitive vessels the Council had observed in Earth's system. These were sleek, advanced craft incorporating technology from dozens of different species. They moved with impossible grace through space, their hulls shimmering with energy fields that bent light around them. 67 years of preparation, Kane continued. "While you ignored us, we were learning from everyone you'd wronged. The Veltar taught us stellar engineering. The Kethmori showed us how to hide industrial operations from orbital sensors. The Zephyrians shared their expertise in quantum communication networks." The arbitrator leaned forward, its ancient face showing the first cracks in its composure. "What do you want?" "Recognition," Kane said simply. "Not as subjects to be integrated or eliminated, but as equals. Full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and protections." Laughter erupted from several sections of the chamber, but it was nervous laughter, lacking the confidence from before. "Impossible," General Corks declared. "Council membership requires unanimous approval from existing members. No species achieves full membership through threats." Kane nodded thoughtfully. "You're absolutely right. Which is why we're not just threatening you." The displays changed once more, showing something that made every alien in the chamber fall silent. Trade routes throughout the galaxy were lighting up with activity. Ships bearing human insignia were arriving at worlds that had never seen contact with Earth, carrying cargo that sensors identified as containing rare elements and advanced technologies. While we were building the Reaper stations, we were also establishing trade relationships, Kane explained. Independent worlds that aren't part of your council. Frontier colonies that feel oppressed by your taxation systems. Even some of your own member species who were interested in technologies you've forbidden them to develop. The implications began to sink in. Humanity hadn't just built weapons. They had built an alternative power structure. Economic warfare, the arbitrator said quietly. Economic opportunity, Kane corrected. We're offering better deals than you do. More advanced technology at lower costs. No restrictions on defensive capabilities. No integration requirements that strip away cultural identity. General Cork stepped forward, his armor now cycling through colors rapidly. This is tantamount to a declaration of war. Kane shook his head. No, General. This is a job application. We want to join your council. We want to work within your system. But we're going to do it as equals, not as another species you can push around when it becomes convenient. He gestured toward the displays showing the Reaper stations. These weapons exist whether you accept us or not. Our trade networks operate whether you approve or not. Our alliance with the survivors of your past actions continues whether you acknowledge it or not. The chamber buzzed with frantic conversations as representatives tried to process what they were hearing. Kane waited patiently, knowing that the next few minutes would determine the course of galactic history. You're forcing our hand, the arbitrator finally said. Kane smiled. We're offering you a choice. Accept humanity as a full member of the Galactic Council, with all the rights and protections that entails. Or discover what happens when a species that doesn't fear you decides to compete with you. The ancient being's 6 eyes studied the human for a long moment. Around them, the chamber continued to pulse with agitated energy as hundreds of alien minds tried to calculate the consequences of this unprecedented situation. We need time to deliberate, the arbitrator announced. Kane checked a device on his wrist. You have 6 hours. After that, our trading partners expect confirmation of our new status. If we can't provide it, they'll assume negotiations have failed and proceed with alternative arrangements. The threat hung in the air like a physical presence. Alternative arrangements that could reshape the entire galactic economy. The game had indeed begun, and humanity was playing by rules that the Council had never encountered before. The 6 hours that followed were the most tense in the Galactic Council's recorded history. David Kane had been escorted to a holding chamber that was more luxury suite than prison cell, but he remained under constant surveillance. Through the transparent walls, he could see the frantic activity as council members huddled in emergency sessions, their various forms of communication creating a chaos of lights, sounds, and pheromone clouds. Kane sat calmly at the single table in his chamber, reviewing data on a tablet that his escorts had surprisingly allowed him to keep. The device showed real-time updates from human operations across the galaxy. Every few minutes, new trade agreements were being signed. More worlds were joining what news networks had begun calling the Independent Commerce Coalition. More council member species were quietly sending diplomatic inquiries about the new technologies humanity was offering. The economic pressure was building exactly as planned. A soft chime indicated someone was approaching his chamber. Kane looked up to see the tall, star-like alien from earlier, accompanied by 2 guards whose species he didn't recognize. The chamber's entrance dilated to allow them entry. I am Nexus Prime Velthera of the Stellar Communion, the alien announced, its voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. I have been chosen to conduct preliminary negotiations. Kane set down his tablet and gestured to the chair across from him. Please sit. Though I should mention that in about 4 hours, this becomes a much more complicated conversation. Velthera's form shifted slightly, adjusting to fit the human-sized furniture. The deadline you imposed. Our analysts suggest it may be artificial pressure designed to force hasty decisions. Your analysts are partially correct, Kane admitted. The 6-hour timeline is somewhat arbitrary, but the consequences of missing it are very real. He activated his tablet's projection feature, displaying a 3-dimensional map of known space. Dozens of star systems pulsed with activity markers. Our trade partners aren't just buying technology from us. They're buying protection, insurance against the kind of integration the Council has historically imposed on inconvenient species. Velthera leaned forward, studying the display. You're selling weapons to non-Council worlds. We're selling the ability to defend themselves, Kane corrected. There's a difference. The technology we're providing is purely defensive. Shields, early warning systems, communication networks that can't be easily monitored or jammed. Defensive technology that happens to make Council authority much more difficult to enforce. Kane smiled. Now you're beginning to understand the situation. The projection zoomed in on specific systems, showing detailed analyses of their strategic importance. Mining worlds that supplied rare elements, agricultural planets that fed entire sectors, transit hubs that controlled major trade routes, all of them now under the protection of human-supplied defense networks. This is more sophisticated than we initially calculated, Velthera admitted. You're not just threatening us militarily, you're undermining our entire system of control. We're offering an alternative, Kane said, one based on mutual benefit rather than fear. Our trade partners receive better deals, more advanced technology, and protection from external threats. In return, we receive resources, knowledge, and strategic positioning throughout the galaxy. Velthara's form shimmered as it processed this information. And if the Council grants humanity full membership? What happens to these alternative arrangements? Kane leaned back in his chair. That depends entirely on how the Council chooses to operate going forward. If you continue the same policies that drove species like the Veltar to hiding and eventual partnership with us, then yes, this alternative system will continue to grow. And if we reform our policies, then we become partners instead of competitors. The Reaper stations become tools for mutual defense instead of threats. Our trade networks become integrated with Council systems instead of competing with them. The survivor species we've been working with get a voice in galactic affairs instead of hiding in the shadows. Velthara was quiet for several moments. Its star-like patterns shifting through colors that Kane's briefing suggested indicated deep thought. You're proposing to fundamentally restructure galactic civilization. We're proposing to improve it, Kane replied. The current system works well for the species at the top, but it's built on the oppression of everyone else. That's not sustainable long-term. The Council maintains order across thousands of worlds. Without centralized authority, chaos would follow. Kane activated another display showing communication logs between human diplomatic teams and various species representatives. We've been in contact with over 200 different groups. Independent worlds, oppressed minorities within Council species, survivor populations, frontier colonies. Do you know what they all have in common? Velthara's pattern shifted to what Kane recognized as curiosity. Tell me. They're all tired of being told what's good for them by beings who've never experienced their struggles. They want a voice in decisions that affect their lives. They want the right to defend themselves without being labeled as threats. Most importantly, they want the option to say no without facing extinction. The projection changed again, showing population data, economic analyses, and military assessments. The numbers were staggering. If all the groups humanity had contacted were to withdraw support from the Council simultaneously, the resulting collapse would be catastrophic. You're holding galactic civilization hostage, Velthara said quietly. Kane shook his head. We're offering it a chance to evolve. The Council can adapt to a more cooperative model, or it can fight to maintain control over an increasingly rebellious population. One path leads to growth and prosperity for everyone. The other leads to galactic civil war. Civil war that you would win. Civil war that everyone would lose, Kane corrected, including us. We're not interested in conquest or domination. We just want to survive and thrive without constantly looking over our shoulders. A new chime indicated another visitor approaching. Velthara's patterns shifted to what Kane interpreted as resignation. The arbitrator has reached a preliminary decision. I'm to escort you back to the main chamber. Kane stood and straightened his uniform. Any hints about which way they're leaning? They're terrified, Velthara admitted. In 3 million years of Council history, no species has ever presented a threat of this magnitude. Your people have managed to weaponize diplomacy itself. As they walked through the corridors of the massive station, Kane could see the evidence of the crisis his presence had created. Emergency sessions were still ongoing in dozens of smaller chambers. Military commanders were studying tactical displays showing the positions of human assets throughout the galaxy. Economic advisors were calculating the cost of various response scenarios. Can I ask you something? Velthara said as they approached the main chamber. Of course. If the Council accepts your terms, how do we know humanity won't simply use its new position to dominate galactic affairs the way we have? Kane paused at the entrance to the chamber, considering the question carefully. Because we've seen what that kind of power does to a civilization. We've met the survivors of your policies. We've seen the cost of ruling through fear. He looked directly at Velthara. We don't want to become you. We want to be better than you. The doors to the chamber began to open, revealing the assembled Council members waiting within. Kane could see the tension in their various forms, the way they held themselves ready for fight or flight. Time to find out if they believe that, he said, and stepped through the doors. The chamber fell silent as Kane took his position in the center circle. The High Arbitrator's 6 eyes fixed on him with an intensity that seemed to bend the light around them. David Kane of humanity, the arbitrator announced, its voice echoing through the vast space. "The council has reached a decision regarding your species' petition for membership." Kane waited, knowing that the next words would determine whether humanity's gamble had succeeded or whether they were about to discover just how costly their defiance would be. The ancient being leaned forward in its throne, and for the first time since Kane had entered the chamber, he saw something unexpected in those alien eyes: respect. The High Arbitrator's words echoed through the chamber like the sound of a closing tomb. David Kane stood in the circle of light, aware that hundreds of alien eyes were studying his every reaction. The ancient being's 6 eyes continued to fix on him with that unexpected look of respect. But Kane knew that respect didn't necessarily mean acceptance. "Before we announce our decision," the arbitrator continued, "there are questions that must be answered. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that our intelligence networks failed to detect. This represents a fundamental failure in our understanding of galactic affairs." Kane nodded slowly. "Ask your questions." General Cork stepped forward, his living armor now a deep purple that Kane's briefings identified as indicating military alertness. "The survivor species you claim to be working with, our records show definitive termination of their populations. How do you explain their continued existence?" Kane had been prepared for this question. "General, your records show what you wanted them to show. When you were located the Veltar to work camps, you assumed that was the end of their story. But some of them escaped before the final roundups. When you strip-mined the Kethmori homeworld, you thought you'd eliminated their entire population, but mining operations create a lot of hiding places. The chamber's displays activated, showing surveillance footage that made several council members shift uncomfortably. The images were grainy and old, but they clearly showed groups of aliens fleeing council forces, disappearing into asteroid fields, hidden bases, and the vast empty spaces between stars. 67 years ago, when your survey ships were cataloging Earth, they weren't the only ones watching," Kane continued. "Some of those survivors had learned to track council movements. They approached us not long after first contact. A new figure emerged from the crowd of representatives. This one was crystalline, its body refracting light into complex patterns as it moved. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes in a storm. You're claiming that our extermination protocols were incomplete. This suggests systematic failure across multiple operations." Kane's expression hardened. "It suggests that when you try to wipe out entire civilizations, some people fight back. Some people refuse to die quietly. Some people remember." The crystalline being pulsed with agitated colors. "The species we removed posed legitimate threats to galactic stability. Their aggression levels were incompatible with peaceful coexistence." "According to who?" Kane demanded. "According to the same council that now considers humanity too aggressive? According to the same intelligence systems that failed to detect our preparations?" He gestured around the chamber. "Maybe the problem isn't that these species were too aggressive. Maybe the problem is that your definition of peaceful coexistence requires species to give up their right to defend themselves." The arbitrator raised one massive hand, calling for silence. "These philosophical debates can continue later. Our immediate concern is the threat your species represents to galactic order." Kane pulled out his communicator again, and several guards tensed. "With your permission, I'd like to show you something." The arbitrator nodded, and Kane pressed a sequence of buttons. The chamber's displays filled with new images that made the assembled aliens gasp collectively. The Reaper stations they had seen earlier were not humanity's only secret. Across the galaxy, human installations were revealing themselves in numbers that defied comprehension. 17 years ago, we made contact with an automated probe from a species that called themselves the Builders, Kane explained. They went extinct long before the Council was formed, but their technology was still functional. Still learning. Still building. The displays showed massive construction sites hidden in the dark spaces between star systems, structures that dwarfed entire planets, powered by technologies that seemed to violate the known laws of physics. The Builders were preparing for something when they died out, Kane continued, something they called the Great Convergence. We've spent the last 17 years trying to understand what they meant. General Corks's armor had shifted to a color Kane didn't recognize. "What did you discover?" Kane's expression grew grave. "They were preparing for the arrival of something from outside the galaxy. Something that their calculations showed would arrive within the next 50 to 100 years. The silence that followed was profound. Even the chamber's living wall seemed to stop pulsing as the implications sank in. External threat, the arbitrator whispered. Massive external threat, Kane confirmed. The builder's records indicate a pattern. Every few million years something sweeps through this galaxy, harvesting advanced civilizations. The builders were trying to create defenses against it when they ran out of time. The displays shifted again, showing astronomical data that painted a terrifying picture. Dark objects moving between galaxies, following trajectories that would bring them into local space within decades. The Veltar stellar engineering technology, the Kethmori stealth systems, the Zephyrian communication networks, Kane explained. We haven't just been stealing these technologies for our own protection. We've been combining them with builder designs to create something bigger. A new image appeared on the displays. It was a structure so massive that it took several moments for the aliens to understand what they were seeing. A ring around an entire star system, covered in defensive installations and industrial platforms that could supply an entire galactic civilization. We call it the Citadel Protocol, Kane said quietly. 17 installations like this hidden throughout the galaxy. Each one capable of supporting billions of refugees and mounting a defense against whatever's coming. The chamber erupted in chaos as representatives tried to process what they were seeing. The arbitrator's voice cut through the noise like a blade. You're claiming that your aggressive preparations are actually defensive measures against an external threat? Kane nodded. The Reaper stations, the trade networks, the alliance with survivor species, even our demand for council membership. All part of the same plan. We need a unified galactic response to what's coming, but we can't achieve that while the council is busy suppressing any species that might actually be useful in a fight. Velthara stepped forward, its star-like patterns shifting rapidly. If this threat is real, why not simply present the evidence to the council? Why the elaborate deception? Kane's smile was bitter. Because the last 3 species who tried to warn the council about external threats were declared delusional and subjected to psychiatric intervention. One of them was the Veltar. They had detected the same anomalies the builders recorded. Instead of listening, you decided they were suffering from collective mental breakdown and needed to be helped. The implications of this revelation sent new shockwaves through the chamber. Several council members were now consulting emergency databases, pulling up files that had been classified for decades. The evidence has been there all along, Kane continued. But you've been so focused on maintaining internal control that you've ignored the bigger picture. The species you've eliminated weren't just inconveniently aggressive. They were trying to prepare for what's coming. General Cork stepped forward again, his armor now cycling through colors so rapidly it was hard to look at. Assuming your claims are accurate, what exactly are you proposing? Kane straightened his uniform and looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from hundreds of different worlds. Full military and economic cooperation. Immediate cessation of suppression policies against species with defensive capabilities. Integration of all surviving populations into a unified defense network. And complete transparency about the true state of galactic security. The arbitrator leaned back in its throne, processing everything it had heard. You're asking us to fundamentally change how we govern galactic civilization. I'm asking you to save it, Kane replied. Because in about 50 years, give or take, everything we've built here is going to be tested by something that makes our current conflicts look like children playing with toys. The ancient being's 6 eyes studied Kane for a long moment. Around them, the chamber buzzed with frantic conversations as the assembled representatives tried to calculate the implications of what they had learned. The council will need to verify your claims, the arbitrator finally said. Kane nodded and handed over a data crystal. Builder archives, Veltar astronomical records, and our own observations. Everything you need to confirm the threat. The arbitrator accepted the crystal, its massive hand dwarfing the small device. And if we find your evidence compelling? Kane's expression grew serious. Then we have a lot of work to do and not much time to do it. Because ready or not, the great convergence is coming. The chamber fell silent as the weight of this revelation settled over the assembled aliens. The game had suddenly become much bigger than anyone had imagined. 3 weeks after David Kane's revelation about the Great Convergence, the Galactic Council chambers had been transformed into something resembling a military command center. Holographic displays showed real-time data streams from across the galaxy, as verification teams confirmed the evidence humanity had provided. The ancient chamber's living walls pulsed with new energy patterns, reflecting the urgent activity of beings who had suddenly discovered their entire worldview needed updating. Kane stood at the center of it all, no longer a prisoner or supplicant, but a strategic advisor coordinating humanity's integration into the largest military preparation in galactic history. The energy restraints were gone, replaced by communication devices that kept him connected to human operations throughout known space. High Arbitrator Vyrix approached, moving with purpose that seemed impossible for such an ancient being. The verification results had aged the creature visibly, adding new lines to features that had remained unchanged for millennia. The deep space monitoring stations have confirmed your astronomical data, Vyrix announced. The objects you detected are real, massive, and following trajectories that will bring them into our galaxy within 47 years. Kane nodded grimly. Our latest calculations suggest 43 years, but the margin of error is significant. The important thing is that we now have confirmation and a timeline to work with. Around them, representatives from dozens of species worked alongside human technicians, and the recently revealed survivors of supposedly extinct civilizations. The sight of Veltar engineers working with council scientists would have been impossible just weeks ago. Now it was the new reality. General Orcs approached, his living armor displaying the muted colors that Kane had learned indicated deep concentration. The Citadel installations your people have constructed are impressive, but they're only partially complete. Our military analysts estimate we'll need at least 15 more installations of similar scale to mount an effective defense. Already in progress, Kane replied, activating a holographic display that showed construction sites throughout the galaxy. The Keth Mori have provided locations for 12 additional installations, all in strategically important positions. The Zephyrian communication networks will allow real-time coordination between all sites. The display zoomed in on individual construction sites, revealing the true scale of humanity's preparation. Each Citadel installation was a feat of engineering that combined the best technologies from dozens of different species. Massive defensive platforms surrounded industrial complexes capable of producing fleets of warships in a matter of months. The economic implications are staggering, added Nexus Prime Velthara, its star-like patterns now displaying the steady rhythms that Kane associated with focused work. Your species has essentially created a parallel galactic economy, optimized for military production. Integration with council systems will require complete restructuring of our trade networks. Kane smiled, which is exactly what we need anyway. The old economic model was designed for peace and stability. What's coming requires something more flexible and responsive. A new figure joined their group, Commander Thex of the Veltar, her scarred features bearing witness to decades of hiding from council forces. She carried data tablets displaying information that would have been impossible to obtain just weeks ago. The survivor populations have provided additional intelligence, Thex reported. We've been monitoring council activities for decades, tracking resource flows and military deployments. Combined with builder archives and human analysis, we've identified 17 critical vulnerabilities in current galactic defenses. The holographic display shifted to show these vulnerabilities: gaps in sensor coverage, supply line bottlenecks, communication dead zones that could be exploited by an invading force. The analysis was thorough and terrifying in its implications. Without the changes humanity is proposing, our current defensive posture would collapse within the first week of contact. Thex continued. The Council's centralized command structure is too rigid to respond to the kind of adaptive tactics the builder records suggest we'll face. General Corks's armor shifted to colors that Kane interpreted as reluctant agreement. Distributed command authority goes against everything we've established over the past 3 million years. So did the existence of this external threat, Kane pointed out. But denial didn't make it go away. High Arbitrator Vyrix studied the tactical displays with eyes that had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The council vote is scheduled for tomorrow. Full membership for humanity, plus formal recognition of all survivor populations and their territorial claims. Assuming the vote passes, what happens next? Kane activated another section of the display, showing organizational charts that outlined the proposed new galactic defense structure. Phase 1 involves immediate military integration. Human Reaper stations become part of a unified early warning network. Council fleets receive upgrades using technologies provided by survivor species. All defensive installations get connected through Zephyrian communication networks. Phase 2, Velthara asked, economic integration. The Independent Commerce Coalition becomes part of Council trade networks, but with expanded rights for member worlds. No more forced integration policies. No more suppression of defensive technologies. Species get to choose their level of involvement. And Phase 3, Kane's expression grew serious. Full mobilization. Once the Citadel installations are complete and our defenses are integrated, we begin active preparation for contact. Training programs, evacuation protocols, contingency plans for when conventional defenses fail. Commander Thex leaned forward. Our analysis suggests conventional defenses will fail. The builder records indicate this enemy adapts to whatever resistance it encounters. Static defenses won't be enough. Kane nodded. Which is why Phase 4 involves something the galaxy has never attempted before. The display changed again, showing simulations that made even the experienced military officers present step back in surprise. Entire star systems were being moved, relocated to positions that would maximize defensive advantages. Planets were being converted into mobile fortresses. Stars themselves were being modified to serve as weapons platforms. Total warfare, General Orcs whispered. You're proposing to weaponize galactic civilization itself. We're proposing to survive, Kane corrected. The builder records show that previous invasions have targeted population centers and industrial installations. If we make every world mobile, every star system a potential weapon, every planet a fortress, then we force the enemy to fight on our terms instead of theirs. The sheer audacity of the plan left the assembled beings speechless. The scale of engineering required would consume the resources of entire civilizations for decades. The cost, Velthara said finally. The economic and social disruption alone would be catastrophic. Kane's expression softened slightly. Less catastrophic than extinction. The builder records are very clear about what happens to civilizations that aren't prepared for this threat. Complete harvesting of technological and biological resources. Total elimination of sentient populations. Sterilization of entire star systems. The chamber fell silent as the reality of their situation sank in fully. This wasn't about territorial disputes or trade agreements anymore. This was about the continued existence of galactic civilization itself. High Arbitrator Vyrix straightened to its full imposing height. The vote tomorrow isn't just about humanity's membership. It's about whether we choose to adapt or die. Kane nodded. And humanity has made it very clear which option we prefer. What if the vote fails? General Orcs asked quietly. Kane's smile returned, but it carried no warmth. Then you'll discover what happens when a species that doesn't fear extinction decides to prepare for war without your permission. The Citadel installations will continue construction. The survivor species will continue their preparations. The Independent Commerce Coalition will continue expanding. And the Council will face the Great Convergence alone, with whatever resources you can scrape together from worlds that still remember how to fight. The implication was clear. Humanity had offered partnership, but they would survive with or without Council approval. The question was whether the rest of galactic civilization would join them or face the coming storm divided. Vyrix looked around the chamber at representatives who were already working together in ways that would have been impossible under the old system. Tomorrow's vote will determine the future of everything we've built here. Kane followed the ancient being's gaze, seeing aliens and humans collaborating on projects that combined technologies from across the galaxy. No, he said quietly. Tomorrow's vote will determine whether we build that future together or separately. But either way, we're going to build it. The Great Convergence was coming, and for the first time in galactic history, someone was going to be ready for it.